Lyria's ears twitched as she edged along the corridor, her hands brushing the smooth metal walls, the hum of the ventilation ducts filling her ears like a constant reminder of what she couldn't see. She had learned to navigate the colony this way, with a mixture of memory, touch, and careful calculation, but even then walls had a way of sneaking up on her. She muttered under her breath, if walls could talk, they'd probably be snickering at me right now, and promptly bumped into a doorframe, bouncing back with a soft grunt. The corridor around her was alive with the usual chaos. Hovering maintenance drones whirring past with trays of supplies, lights flickering in rhythms that sometimes made her feel like she was walking through a giant, blinking insect, and voices echoing in languages she could understand but only partly parse. Every step was a negotiation with the world. Lyria, a voice called high-pitched and mocking. She recognized it immediately. Taryn, the colony's most enthusiastic teaser who had a knack for turning even the smallest mishap into a spectacle. Try not to fall into a gravity corridor this time. Wouldn't want you orbiting the cafeteria again. Lyria huffed a laugh, though it was more of a defensive cough, and whispered, "At least I didn't knock over the food again, not today." She knew she was tempting fate with her self-deprecating humor, but it was better than pretending it didn't sting a little when people laughed at her clumsiness. The next step proved treacherous. A small platform drifted too close to the wall, and she misjudged the space, her shoulder grazing a panel that immediately beeped in alarm. She waved at it apologetically. "I swear, I didn't mean to insult your circuitry," and moved on, the panel's lights dimming in a sort of grudging forgiveness. Somewhere, a drone hiccuped and sprayed a mist of coolant into the air, forming tiny rainbow arcs that sparkled briefly before dissipating. Lyria found herself laughing outright, a soft, melodic sound that caught a few nearby humans and aliens off guard. Humor was easier when the universe seemed intent on humiliating you in technicolor. Jonas appeared just then, tripping over a small tangle of hover wires, arms flailing like a marionette whose strings had been cut. "Oh, for the love of," he began, only to topple into a crate of synthetic fruits which bounced with a cartoonish plop. Lyria couldn't help it. She laughed, ear tips twitching in amusement. "Are you trying to compete with me for the colony's clumsiest resident award?" she teased. Jonas grinned sheepishly, brushing sticky goo from his sleeve. "I like to think of it as performance art," he said, winking. There was something endearing in his human awkwardness, something unpretentious that made her want to reach out to him in ways she normally didn't with anyone in the colony. Despite her humor, Lyria's world was filled with sharp edges. She had memorized the layout of the colony, from the bioluminescent gardens floating in midair to the narrow service corridors that rattled whenever a transport pod passed. Her hands moved over the walls with practiced precision, brushing against panels, grooves, and emergency call buttons. But even with this intimate knowledge, she stumbled sometimes. Her long ears, delicate and expressive, twitched involuntarily as her other senses compensated, detecting vibrations in the floor and faint currents of air moving past. She could hear the world in ways most others never noticed, and yet that skill was constantly overshadowed by her lack of sight. A sudden clang made her freeze. A maintenance bot had dropped a container of liquid metal, and the floor shimmered dangerously underfoot. Lyria paused, squinting against the invisible hazard. "I see you, floor. Very funny," she muttered, sidestepping carefully. Jonas, still scraping goo from his hands, suddenly appeared beside her, holding out a hand. "Need some assistance, or are we doing the slapstick duet today?" he asked, smirking. She hesitated, then nodded, letting him guide her a few steps. The colony was alive with motion, lights, and odd smells, the tang of synthetic flora, the metallic tang of machinery. But for the first time, with Jonas beside her, it felt less threatening, less like a gauntlet designed to mock her every step. They reached the edge of the corridor where a gravity lift waited, humming and shimmering. Lyria stretched her arms to steady herself. "If I survive this ride without colliding with the ceiling, I'll count it as a win," she joked. Jonas chuckled, pressing a button and activating the lift. As they ascended, the colony stretched beneath them, lights twinkling like stars trapped in metal cages. Lyria inhaled sharply, the vibrations in the floor and air mixing with the motion of the lift. She imagined the view, but it was only shadows and shapes. Still, she felt a sense of anticipation, a flicker of possibility that someone, maybe even a human like Jonas, might understand the peculiar, chaotic beauty of seeing life the way she could sense it. By the time they reached the top, Lyria was smiling genuinely, her humor mixing with a rare flicker of hope. The corridor beyond awaited, filled with new challenges, new obstacles and inevitable stumbles, but also new opportunities. Somewhere in the chaos of her blind navigation, she sensed that a small, improbable bond was forming, one that might change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. And as Jonas leaned slightly, still catching his breath from the gravity lift, she teased, "Try not to fall into a wall next time or I might start taking notes." He grinned. "No promises," he said, and for the first time in a long while, Lyria laughed without reservation, the sound echoing down the corridor like a spark of light in the mechanical shadows. Lyria tapped carefully along the corridor, her fingers brushing the smooth, humming panels, each vibration and faint temperature shift telling her more than her eyes ever could. The gravity fields in this sector were notoriously unpredictable, a legacy of some eccentric engineer who thought it would be fun to mix vertical and horizontal travel. Fun for everyone but her, that is. As she stepped onto a platform, it lurched sideways, spinning her slightly, and she laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "Oh, fantastic! My own private spin cycle," she muttered, catching a railing just in time. The platform squeaked in protest, as if embarrassed for her clumsiness, and she gave it a sarcastic pat, murmuring, "Don't worry, I forgive you. Today." "Careful, careful." Jonas called from the next platform over, trying to maintain balance while juggling 3 containers of bioluminescent fruit that seemed intent on leaping off at the slightest provocation. Gravity fields have a wicked sense of humor here. He stumbled, sending one container spinning into a low hover drone, which shrieked in protest, narrowly avoiding a collision with a maintenance bot. Lyria chuckled, ear tips twitching in amusement. "You humans really do like slapstick, don't you?" she said, though the sound carried a warmth Jonas hadn't heard before, and he grinned, proud of earning her rare compliment. The lift hummed beneath them, pulling them up into a chamber that smelled faintly of ozone and synthetic pollen, a bizarre mix that made Lyria wrinkle her nose. She felt the faint vibration of machinery underfoot, the subtle shifts in the air, and the constant hum of energy flowing through the walls. This chamber was home to some of the colony's experimental tech, hovering laboratories, energy conduits that pulsed with colored light, and interactive holographic displays that often had minds of their own. Lyria had memorized the layout as best she could, but the machines often had the last laugh. A holographic map flickered to life in front of her, its 3-dimensional projection spinning lazily. "Direction, please," the system prompted in a voice that tried to sound neutral but came across as slightly exasperated. Lyria waved a hand instinctively. "Yes, hi. Could you not try to electrocute me today?" she asked. The map responded with a polite hum, readjusting its projections, but misaligned one path, sending a cluster of floating icons crashing softly into each other. Jonas muttered, "I think it's taking revenge for yesterday." Lyria snorted. Wouldn't be the first time technology held a grudge. They moved through the chamber, carefully dodging a misfiring hover bot that occasionally flicked sparks, and Lyria could feel her pulse quicken. Not with fear, exactly, but with the thrill of maneuvering through something alive with energy and unpredictability. She tapped a conduit wall lightly, listening to the resonance of the metal beneath. "I swear these walls giggle when I bump into them," she said. Jonas shook his head, grinning. "I think they like you, or maybe they just enjoy the chaos." They reached a section of the lab filled with a strange, alien biotechnology. pods containing fluid that shimmered with shifting colors, tendrils of light curling above them as though alive, and small robotic assistants floating lazily, humming in harmonic sequences. Jonas paused, glancing at Lyria. I wanted to ask you something, he said, shoving his hands in his pockets, which immediately triggered a small alarm on a nearby console. Or maybe that's too dramatic. Lyria tilted her head, her ears twitching, intrigued. Try me, she said, teasing, though her curiosity was genuine. Jonas took a deep breath. There's a way, possibly, to give you vision. Not perfect, not normal, but you could see through me. It's kind of insane. He gestured toward the alien pods where a faintly glowing interface floated midair. Human neuroscience integrated with alien biotech, some experimental neural mapping. You'd experience my visual perception, essentially sharing my sight. Lyria froze for a moment, fingers grazing a pod instinctively. The idea was absurd, almost comedic in its audacity, but also tantalizing. So, you're offering me your eyeballs, metaphorically speaking? She asked dryly. Jonas laughed, more like the whole wiring. Think of it as high-tech, slightly illegal eye donation. Lyria pondered, balancing the humor against her curiosity. She had navigated the colony blind her whole life, adapting to its quirks, laughing at her own missteps, but the thought of truly seeing, of experiencing the colony in ways she never could, was intoxicating. And what if it goes wrong? She asked, ear-tips flicking nervously. Jonas shrugged, brushing coolant residue off his sleeve. Then we both have a new definition of chaos, but I think it'll work. Mostly, probably, maybe. Lyria laughed, a sound that seemed to echo in the glowing chamber, mingling with the hum of the pods. Mostly, that's comforting. They spent hours navigating the preparations. Jonas fumbling with alien interfaces while Lyria teased him relentlessly, imagining all the ways the experiment could go horribly wrong. If I end up seeing floating kittens chasing quantum fish, I'm blaming you, she said. Deal, he replied with mock solemnity. Finally, the moment came. Jonas extended his hand, allowing her to stabilize herself against his shoulder. Ready? He asked. Lyria nodded, a mixture of trepidation and excitement coursing through her. She reached toward the interface, feeling the hum of energy, the subtle vibrations that promised transformation, and as the neural link initiated, a rush of light, color, and perception flooded her senses. She blinked, literally, though her eyes had never worked before, and the world exploded in detail. Floating corridors shimmered with energy, drones sparkled like fireflies, and the chamber around her teemed with movement she could never have imagined. She gasped, a mixture of awe and laughter escaping her lips. Oh my walls, they're judging me more than ever. Jonas grinned beside her, catching her humor, and in that instant their chaotic journey through corridors, mishaps, and misfiring tech crystallized into a shared adventure. The world was no longer only to be felt and imagined. It could be seen, explored, and even joked about. And somewhere in the midst of glowing pods and humming conduits, a fragile, extraordinary bond began to take shape, one neither of them had anticipated but both would cherish. Lyria's eyes blinked open, and the world hit her with a shock of brilliance. Every surface shimmered with detail she had never imagined. The iridescent panels of the colony walls, the floating gardens bathed in soft bioluminescence, and the intricate patterns of conduits snaking across ceilings and floors like luminescent rivers. She gasped and laughed, the sound carrying a mixture of disbelief and delight. Oh, the walls, they are so judgmental, she said, ear-tips twitching as Jonas grinned beside her. He looked slightly disheveled, coolant smears still on his sleeve. But in her new vision, every detail of his human awkwardness was oddly charming, and she couldn't resist teasing. The corridors, once a labyrinth of uncertainty and humiliation, now pulsed with life. Hover drones darted between rooms, each one a blur of metallic color and reflective panels, and the gravity fields shimmered like liquid glass, turning every movement into a dance. Lyria stepped forward cautiously, then laughed outright as her foot accidentally hovered a few centimeters above the floor before the field corrected itself. "I always thought I was clumsy," she said, "but apparently the universe was holding back." Jonas snorted. "Finally, a fair fight. I think you're winning." Their laughter echoed, filling spaces that had once been heavy with mockery and tension. As she moved through the colony, she noticed the subtle expressions of her peers for the first time. The way Taryn's long ears flicked nervously when he realized she could see, the slight tilt of an eyebrow, the almost imperceptible blush on others who had once laughed at her. Instead of feeling shame, Lyria felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. She waved at Taryn, who froze, unsure how to respond. "Don't worry," she said, her voice light. "I forgive the walls, but you're still on probation." Taryn stammered, and even Jonas chuckled at the sight, a human finding amusement in alien social awkwardness just as she did. They reached the floating gardens, where luminous flora hovered in midair, petals rippling like liquid crystal. Lyria ran her fingers along a soft, glowing vine, marveling at the textures and colors she had only ever imagined. Jonas reached beside her, extending his hand, and she linked her fingers through his. The connection was no longer one of nervous caution. It was an unspoken trust, a bond forged through chaos, humor, and the shared experience of technology bending the impossible into reality. "It's more than I imagined," she said softly. "Everything's so alive." Jonas smiled. "And you're seeing it all for yourself now. No walls, no obstacles, just you." A sudden shimmer caught her eye, a panel she had bumped into countless times, now revealed in full detail. It was etched with intricate designs, tiny filigree patterns that pulsed faintly with energy. She bent down, tracing the lines with fascination. "I never knew you were beautiful," she said, voice tinged with wonder, and Jonas laughed. "You've got a way of seeing beauty in chaos, don't you?" Lyria nodded, realizing that the world hadn't changed as much as her perception had. The colony, the corridors, the machinery, they were the same, but she had grown to perceive their rhythm, their subtlety, their personality. Humor remained their anchor. She flicked a small floating orb which bounced off a wall and narrowly missed Jonas. "Careful, that's a deadly projectile," she warned in mock seriousness. He ducked theatrically. "I live on the edge," he said, grinning, "but I'd follow your eyes anywhere." They moved together through the corridors, now more playground than obstacle course, sharing jokes and laughter, teasing each other over misjudged gravity fields and hovering fruit containers. Each moment felt expansive, yet intimate, filled with the joy of discovery and the thrill of companionship. By the time they reached the main observatory, the colony's vast expanse stretched before them, a kaleidoscope of glowing architecture and floating gardens suspended in a void of faintly twinkling stars. Lyria leaned on the railing, absorbing it all, the subtle currents of energy, the delicate interplay of light and motion, the vibrancy she had never known existed. Her life before had been cautious, protective, bound by the limitations of her blindness. Now every sense aligned with the world, and she could engage fully, humor and joy intertwined with newfound clarity. Jonas stood beside her, quiet for a rare moment. "You've changed," he said softly. "Not just because you can see now, but because you're embracing it all, every absurd, beautiful, chaotic detail." Lyria smiled, ears flicking. "And you've changed, too. You're not just a human fumbling through alien tech. You're my guide through a world I never thought I'd experience, and you somehow made it fun." They laughed together,